In the obj milk, let's make it so we can get rid of it. And so we're going to add an event, and we're just going to say mouse left pressed. So whenever they click on the milk, it's going to call this code, and we're just going to say instance destroy. Get rid of the milk. Later, we're going to add stuff here to add to the score, whatever else we want to do whenever we click on a milk. But for now, we're just going to say instance destroy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, milk. Click it, it's gone. 3, 4, 5, milk. Click it, it's gone, and so on. So we almost have a game. The milk pops up, you click it, it goes away. Very fun. Let's make it so when we click on the cow, it goes a little bit faster. Okay, so if we have this set to 30, that's great. And now we need something to click on the cow. So we can add a new event. So we're in the obj cow code. And let's go up here where it has this plus, and we can add a new event. And we can just go mouse left pressed. And that adds our new event right here. If you want to see less code, you can click this plus and minus next to those to hide those. But for now, left press. What do we want to do when we click on the cow? We want to add to our milk time, right? So milk time by how much? By 10? Remember, a million is 1 second, so maybe we want to add a million. Let's make a new variable, click time bonus. And let's say 1 million, so 1 with 6 zeros, times how many seconds do you want it to skip every time you click? For now, let's do 10, but I think we probably want it to be, I don't know, 1 or something. And milk time, I'm going to copy and paste click time bonus. So milk time increases by our click time bonus every single time we click our cow. So I'm going to run our game. Remember, it's 30 seconds. So every 3 times I click, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, I get more milk. So I gotta just sit here and click, 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 click. But that's too fast. I'm gonna change this to 1. Yes, 1 million times 1 is the same, but when I read this code as a human, I can see that I mean 1 second. So I actually like leaving the 1 here. You can delete it and just say 1 million. Also, if I wanted it to be a half a second bonus, I could say times 0.5. That's half a second. Let's put this to 5 seconds, let's say. It's hard to tell that clicking the cow does anything, though. You notice that? Like, it's kind of boring looking, clicking the cow. The cow just sits there. It doesn't do anything. So let's add an animation so that every time I click the cow, it the whole sprite kind of jiggles, it shakes to kind of show me that clicking it does something. So we're going to do that by using something called sequences. And we need to do a few things for our sequences. So I'm going to create a new group. Create group. I'm going to call this sequences. Sequences. And you can see there's a sequence object or like thing that we can create in GameMaker. Create one. Let's call this seq underscore shake. Okay, so this is going to be an animation that shakes. And what you do is you can drag an asset here, and it's like a little movie editor, and we can animate it. But we don't want to add the cow here. What we want to do is add like a placeholder object so that we can apply the sequence to anything we want, not just the thing we're animating. If that doesn't make sense, it should make a little more sense as we go forward. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new group inside of this group. And we're just going to name it placeholder. And we're going to create a sprite. Call it SPR placeholder. and we're going to create an object. We're going to call it obj placeholder. And we're going to give the obj placeholder to sprite. And we're going to make sure our SPR sprite has the middle center defined as its origin. Okay. Now let's look at our sprite milk. That's about 230 pixels big. And then let's look at our cow sprite. It's 500 by 400. So let's make our placeholder sprite, I don't know, 250 pixels by 250 pixels. And then we can make this whatever we want. I'm going to use this circle. And I'm going to, oh, and we can turn on the grid to kind of see what we're doing here. I'm going to make a circle. I'm going to hold shift to make it a perfect circle. I'm just going to do something, oops, something like this. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's just a placeholder, but and then we're gonna fill it in with like a gray color or something. Okay, and then we could, if you want, we could go here, choose a pencil tool and make a big circle and use the white color, and you could do something like make it a question mark or something. It really doesn't matter what this placeholder is because we're never going to see it in the game. We're only going to see it when we're editing our sequences. See this track panel? These are the things we are animating here in the sequence. And so we're going to drag and drop our obj placeholder and just drop it here in the track panel. And now we have this obj placeholder. And then we have this. It's kind of like when you're watching a video and you can fast forward and rewind it by, they call it scrubbing, by moving that little bar around. We have something similar like that. This shows our time. And instead of seconds, it's in frames, and it's 60 frames per second. And so every second, it's going to do this whole video. To show you what it is, so we kind of want it to jiggle, but I also want to make the size bounce around a little bit too. So what we could do is, okay, we're animating the obj holder. And so we could click this little button and choose rotation. And it adds this rotation here. That means we are going to be animating the rotation. And what's really cool about this is we can move this time bar wherever we want and say, let's set the rotation to 0. And see how that, for the first one, sometimes you gotta put in one number and then erase it and put in another. But then you see this little white dot showed up. Okay, right there. That means when this yellow bar, when it's playing, when it's animating, when it hits that, it's going to change. It's going to be rotated at 0. Okay? A whole second long actually feels kind of long. So we're actually, this is only going to be like, I don't know, let's set it to pretty short, 16. And so we can move this red bar. That's how long that is. These green bars, we can move that down too. Did you see how I did that? It was here. And when you mouse over it, your mouse turns into those two arrows. And we can just move that to here. So now we have a 16 frame long animation. So let's just make it jiggle. Let's put our yellow bar on the 4th frame here. So 4F. And let's change rotation just to, let's say 5. Okay. And I added a new arrow. And then let's go to the 8. And do the same thing, but let's make it now 0. And then let's go to the 12, and let's make it now -5. Okay? And then at the 16, at the end, we want it to be back to 0 again. Okay? So now when you drag your yellow bar, do you see how the circle's kind of dancing a little bit? And you can even hit the play button right here. It just does a little diddly, you know? Just gives a little jiggle. Make it a little bit more interesting than that. So instead of just doing rotation, let's also hit the plus again. And this time choose scale. Scale is how big you're magnifying it. So you can make it smaller, These are percentages, so if we say 1 by 1, it's going to be teeny tiny. You can't even see it. If we make it like 50, 50% is half, right? And so now it's half as big. As it's jiggling, let's also make it bigger. So starting here, we want it to be 100 and 100, okay? And then, see, I accidentally added one here. That was 50% when I was showing you. This is what's cool about sequences. See how I only had to say 100% here and 50% here. And now everything in between is automatic for me. And so it makes it nice and smooth automatically. They call that tweening, in between, tweening. In old Disney movies, Disney himself, he didn't draw every single frame all the time. Maybe he did in some of his movies, but he would do the key frames, the most important ones, and then hire somebody to draw all the in-between frames. And they call those people tweeners. And this editor is doing the same thing for us. These white dots are keyframes. We're saying, this is a key moment. I want it to look exactly like this on this white dot moment. But I'm going to let the sequence editor figure out everything in between. And so it's figuring out the rotate. Okay, if I want to get to 5 after 4 frames, almost every frame, I'm going to rotate by about 1. Same with scale. If I want to get to 50% after 16 frames, then I'm going to be at 75% halfway through. Okay, but we don't want to go quite that small. And we don't want, I accidentally added this keyframe. So if I click this keyframe, it turns blue, and I can right click it, and I can say delete key. And now that key is gone. Does that make sense? Okay, so what I do want to do is maybe halfway through the animation, let's say, I don't want it to be super noticeable. I just want it to be subtle. So I'm going to say 110 and 110 right there. And see this little button right here, this link values? It looks like a chain. If that's gray like mine is, then if I change one, it will change both for me. If I click that, I can change these to different values. And so I can do like 105 or, like 150 and see how it's kind of squashed. So I'm just going to leave it linked. So 110 there, and then let's go to frame, I don't know, it doesn't matter, 14. And let's make this a little bit smaller. So instead of 110, let's make it 95. So it's a teeny bit smaller than normal. And then by the end, again, we want a new keyframe, and we're going to go back to normal. So if I hit play, oh, see how it kind of, it just kind of makes it a little bit interesting. So what we want to do is every time we click the cow, we want the cow to do this exact animation every time, okay? So how do we use the sequence? We're going to use a function I wrote. And I'll explain it, but you don't really need to fully understand it. This is something I think they should have built into GameMaker, honestly. I'm going to create a new group. I'm going to call it scripts. And in our scripts, I'm going to create a new script. And I'm going to name this sequence utils, like utilities. Like these are some scripts for our sequences. And here is the code. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so that it all fits on there. And oh, we don't want that. We want it to be obj placeholder. Okay. So what this is it's a new command or a new function called create sequence. You give it the object you want to animate. This sequence asset is going to be seq shake, or we can make an seq grow or an seq shrink or whatever, right? We can make all sorts of things. That's what we're going to pass in. And then this track obj to replace, what that is if you remember in our sequence, we have this object right here, obj placeholder. We want to replace it. We want this object to be replaced with the one we want to animate. That's what we're saying there. It's always going to be obj placeholder. And so that's why I did this equals obj placeholder here. What that does in a function, it says this is the default. That makes it optional, so when you call create sequence, you don't have to provide the last value. But if you need to change it sometimes, then you can then add it and replace it. What's cool is we can document this. So it has this create JS doc header, but you can also just which you can click and it will add. Or you could just go 1, 2, 3. 3 slashes in front of a function, and it will automatically fill this all in for you. And somehow it was able to guess what types we want these to be. We want this to be a sequence, but obj, we want that to be we could say Id.Instance or Asset.GMObject. That makes it so when we call create sequence in our code and it pops this up, it tells us what it is. What is it? A number? Is it an object? Is it a sequence? So actually I'm going to fix this so it needs to be capitalized. GM sequence, GM object. Okay. And then we can give it a description. So what does this function do? We could say it creates a sequence and applies it to a given object. Okay. And what is this obj? The object we want to animate with the sequence. What is a sequent asset? The sequence we want to use on the object. And what is track obj to replace? And see how it put those brackets? Remember how sometimes they're optional? This one's optional, so it put the brackets in there. And the object in the sequence to replace. And then what does it return? It returns the created sequence. Okay, so that makes it so whenever we go to create sequence, it pops up and it tells us exactly what it is and how to use it. Okay, so you don't have to do this, but I think it's nice for these kind of complicated functions that I don't want to memorize what it's doing. Like something I learned from somebody on a YouTube video on the internet. This create sequence. So I'll provide this so that you can copy and paste it, or you can just read what it says and copy it down. But step by step, just so you kind of understand what it is, I'm going to get the sequence. I'm going to create the actual sequence, layer, sequence, create. And we're just going to add it to the same layer and the same position of the object. And this is the asset we're creating. And then we're going to find inside of the sequence something called a sequence instance. This has additional information about the sequence, then including what the object is. And then we could say, we're going to override object in the sequence. We're going to say, hey, for this sequence instance, we're going to replace an obj placeholder with our cow, or whatever it is we want to animate. Okay, I know it's a little bit confusing, but now we have this function, and anytime we want to use a sequence to animate any object, we can use this, as long as that sequence uses the obj placeholder for its animation. So let me show you how this works. Let's go back to our cow, and we want a click animation. So now, what did we name our function? Create sequence. So we could go to our cow, and we could say create sequence. And we needed to, okay, what object are we animating? Well, we're animating ourselves. So we'll say self. What a sequence do we want to use? We want to use seq shake. And then this last one's optional. We're not going to do that one because it's the placeholder. Okay, so now we have our sequence. We named it click animation inside of our cow. So now whenever we click down here in our left press, we can do layer, sequence, play, and we can do click animation. And so every time we click it, it should animate. So let's run the game and see. Oh, my cow disappeared. What? It's playing. Hearing. I think we want to put the sequence to the end of the animation so that it's not trying to do anything. So if we say var end frame equals layer sequence get length. So how long is this animation? And then we could say layer sequence head position. We can set it to the end frame. Let's see. Yeah, we need to say for our click animation, let's put it to the end. Okay, what we want to do is we want to set the sequence to the beginning. So we say our click animation, we want you to be at the start. Then we want to pause it. Okay, and so now our animation is paused. And so when we play it, it's just doing its normal thing. And then when I click it, it dances. Okay, I see what we did wrong here. The sequence length is set to 60. I was thinking resizing this green bar and this red bar and all that stuff changed that, but it doesn't. So if we change this to 17, which is how many frames we have, then when we run our game, we don't need this. We do want all that. There we go. That's the problem. Okay, so we do, I think if we took these two out, so we want to set it to the beginning of our sequence. After we create the sequence, we want to set our head position. That's where we want to set the sequence to its beginning, so 0. And then we want to pause it, because if we don't, you'll see the cow will do that when the game loads the cow at the start. We don't want that. So we set the head position to 0, and then we pause. And then every time we click it, it'll play the animation. All right, one more thing, and this is a decision you'll want to make, is if I click while it's already animating, it feels kind of funny, like it's ignoring it. And so I think what I want to do is when I click it and it's already playing, I want to start the animation over. So I'm going to copy this head position before sequence play. I'm going to set the head position to 0 again. So I'll show you what that does. So now when I click it really fast, it kind of feels like it's listening to all my clicks. Another way to do this is to actually say, in our click, we could say something like if it's playing, the animation is playing. So you could do like layer sequence is finished. And you could give it our click animation. And if this is true, so if, I'll wrap this in our mustaches real quick. So you can see if I add that if statement, oh, well, that's not true because if we set this to 17, so the end, then it is actually ignoring my click and not just not dancing. The way it was before I added any of this, it would do the click, it would add the milk time, but it wouldn't animate it unless it was finished animating already. Personally, I like it like this, where every time we click it, we set it back to the 0. And then up here at the top, we set this to 0. This is my favorite way. It feels kind of satisfying if I can click really fast and I can see how fast I'm clicking. I can tell that it's doing something clicking faster. So this is my favorite way to do it.